same.
No.
Wouldn't you agree, folks? Warmed up coffee in the microwave, just not the same as fresh brewed, but you know, when you make too much the day before, that's what you got. Let's start a show, kids. It's Friday, September 20th, and once again, having trouble streaming to a couple of the Facebook pages. So, yeah, there's that one. I think we're going to get one more message, and then I'm going to tell you all about the show. Forgive the little housekeeping that's going on here. All right. So far, so good. Friday, September 20th. As I was saying, this is Up North News Radio. I'm Pat Kreitlow. Greg Bach is in Waukesha. It's Friday, so he's going to tell us what's at the Laughing Tap coming up. Friday means we talk to Keya Vakil. We're going to talk about that North Carolina governor's race with that wacky Republican candidate who was already wacky before everything that we learned yesterday about all the messages that he put on a pornographic website message board. Who puts messages on a message board of a pornographic website? But anyway, I digress. Let's see. Former U.S. Attorney Jim Santel will be here. I'm going to ask him if I'm right or wrong in the way that I interpreted, the way the Dodge County Sheriff interpreted, how the Wisconsin Supreme Court interpreted the law when it comes to absentee ballot drop boxes. Mark Jacob will talk about press coverage this week of the big events, which really got rocked yesterday with news that one leading reporter who was really leading the charge that, you know, Joe Biden should get out of the race and Robert F. Kennedy is a good man. Well, it turns out they might have been having a little relationship. So we'll talk to Mark Jacob about that. Dan Schumacher with sports. Oh, what a day we're going to have today. That's coming up at 6:06 here on the Civic Media Radio Network. I'm going to try to get through this warmed up coffee and see you in 3.5 minutes.
Johnson from Civic Media. This is Up North News Radio. Now, live from our Lake Wissota studio, here's the founding editor of Up North News, Pat Brightlow.
Well, hey there, Wisconsin. Good morning. It is 6:06 on this Friday morning, September 20th, 2024. 46 days till Election Day, and it's another beautiful morning to have you here up north. Live from Lake Wissota, from wherever you're listening across the Civic Media Radio Network, the Civic Media app, on demand by podcast or through some social media video feeds. Thanks for starting your day right here. I have so many questions to start the day. I don't even know where to begin. I could ask, oh, you know what? Greg Bach is here. We could let him, we could turn this into a little game show here. Greg Bach is in Waukesha. Mr. Bach, good morning.
Good morning, Pat.
I have so many questions. So let's pretend it's like a Jeopardy board. I could ask a question about the economy. I could ask a question about sports.
Yeah.
I could ask a question about comedy.
Yeah.
I could ask a question about porn sites. I could ask a question about Glenn Grothman. We're going to cover all these things anyway. But if I were to ask a question about any one of them, which one would you pick?
Man, you really piqued my interest when you said porn. I love comedy.
Comedy. Here we go. Greg Bach, what's at the Laughing Tap this weekend?
Wish I had like music like we have Rachel Mack for 3 shows.
I was just about to freak out. Rachel Maddow is doing comedy at the Laughing Tap, but no.
Everyone's doing comedy now. Everyone's taking their jobs.
Mack, you say?
Yeah, Rachel Mack. She has been on Comedy Central. She has been, she's toured all over the country. She is very, very, very funny. A dry wit about that young woman. And she'll be here at the Laughing Tap for 1 show tonight at 7:30, 2 shows tomorrow, 7:30 and 10. Tickets are available at laughingtap.com, $22 online. And today I'll tell you, if you want to go to a late show on Saturday at 10 p.m., we are offering $10 off tickets. So you can type in the code 10 off, TENOFF, and you can get $10 off those tickets for the Saturday late night 10 p.m. show. But yeah, she will be here. It'll be a lot of fun. The lineup is going to be fun too. Elijah Holbrook is our feature, and he is very wonderful. And then Katie Miners is a force of nature. She is hosting, and it's going to be a great time.
Just remember the code TENOFF.
TENOFF.
And you will get that discount. 855-75-CIVIC is how to join the show here, 855-75-CIVIC, or you can text us at that number, or you can use the Civic Media app. And Greg, why do we want people to have the Civic Media app loaded on their phones and ready to go, say, an hour from now?
Because that's the only way you can participate in the Go for the Green or Gold text to win contest today.
That's right. We're going to have a keyword coming up in the next hour, and you have a chance to win either gold jewelry or cash and be entered into a grand prize drawing to see the Green and Gold play some football-y in December. So stick around for that as well. Coming up on the program this morning. Well, okay. What was the porn thing about? Keya Vakil. Keya Vakil is going to be here. Courier Newsroom national correspondent. Here's Greg. Here's the question. Does anybody go to a porn site to have political commentary on the message board? I got the answer. The answer is no. Nobody does that. But apparently you can do that and then 10, 15 years later run for governor of North Carolina. And that's the thing Keya Vakil is going to talk about, is the Republican nominee for governor of North Carolina. Is now denying a whole slew of messages that he referred to himself as a black Nazi and criticized Martin Luther King and Barack Obama, and all this on the message boards of an adult website.
Or you start.
I don't have a Mike Myers voice, but honestly, who does this?
It's a grassroots campaign, Pat. That's where you start. You find your people.
Apparently,
you craft your message. I guess
that's what he's.
I mean, I don't know. I haven't heard your interview with Keya about this, but honestly, when I heard about it, I was like, that's on brand for Mark Robinson. And someone said, you think he's going to drop it? I'm like,
no, he's not. He's now claiming, then this is the thing everybody does now. It's AI.
Oh,
everything is AI.
Because that happened in 2010.
Yeah. What a great way to avoid accountability is that it was all made up. So yes, Keya will be here later this hour to talk about the Mark Robinson news, a guy that was already on the crazy train, and the crazy train is just picking up speed like crazy there. There's a saying, or I just made it up. You can't cover the circus if you're sleeping with the elephants. Anyway, it leads us into a discussion of how a prominent reporter known for her favorable coverage of Robert Kennedy Jr. is apparently suspended and accused of having a close relationship with the story subject. We'll talk to Mark Jacob about that. We'll talk to former U.S. Attorney Jim Santel about whether county sheriffs should be interpreting election law around Wisconsin. And, of course, Dan Schumacher will be here to talk about sports. And so this is the part where Pat talks to Greg about sports and people go, oh, you're getting too deep into this stuff again. But,
it's so boring, Pat, when you talk about sports.
So, look, this again, maybe only baseball fans will appreciate this. And, yeah, we're talking about Shohei Ohtani and what he did yesterday. And it's not just that he became the first ever person in Major League Baseball history to hit 50 home runs in a season and steal 50 stolen bases. That never happens. That's people don't have those kind of gifts. And this guy pitches. But that's actually not the big thing from yesterday. Here's the thing. Since 1920, when they first started measuring RBIs, runs batted in, over the course of an entire career, no player has had a game with 10 or more RBIs, and then a game with 6 or more hits, and then a game with 5 or more extra base hits, double, triple home run, a game with 3 or more home runs, and a game with 2 or more stolen bases. That's 5 different things. Nobody has had all 5 of those kinds of games over the course of their career. Shohei Ohtani did that yesterday in one game while becoming the first ever 50-50 player. So, again, I'm not asking anybody to be a Dodger fan. I'm just saying I really admire this kid. I think he's 30 now. I mean, it just defies explanation. And I'm very happy for him. He seems well grounded. That betting scandal with his interpreter earlier this year did not seem to have taken root on him. So good for him. I just think that's super cool.
I mean, that's what happens when an organization is allowed to or can invest $1 billion in someone. They make things go away. But also, I've been an Ohtani fan since he was on the Angels, and he's got a light about him that is fun and fantastic, and he is baseball, and you can't not respect him. That's just not a thing. You can't be like, oh, there's nothing you can say bad about him in baseball that's true as far as like he's the most talented player probably on earth right now.
And here's the thing. When we were going through the big home run cycle with Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire, and then people looked into the performance enhancing drugs, and people said, well, yeah, but you still got to hit the baseball. You need hand-eye coordination. True, but the performance enhancing drugs definitely had something to do with muscle power to hit those home runs.
Yeah.
But there isn't a drug that gives you home run power and the speed to steal 50 bases and all of the extra base hits. And did I mention he's also a pitcher?
Yes, like a good one too.
Like one of the great pitchers. He's recovering this year from surgery on that shoulder, but again, just fantastic. Okay, people are like, can you get to the Brewers, please? Yes, but I just wanted that moment of admiration and recognition. The Brewers did drop the opener of the 4-game series against the Arizona D-backs 5-1. It was game number 152 of the season, and the first one of the year where Willy Adames got a day off. The man's just a workhorse, but it's like, all right, we clinched the division. You can finally have a day off. Garrett Mitchell's solo homer accounted for the Brewers' only run. Colin Ray will get the start for Game 2 of the series, 7:10 tonight. 7:10, that would mean a pregame at, 6:35 probably? Yep, on stations WRCE in Richland Center, WRJN in Racine, Kenosha, WCQ in Park Falls, WISS in Oshkosh. So 7:10 tonight for the Brewers, 6:10 Saturday, and 1:10 on Sunday for the rest of this Arizona series. They're off on Monday. Then they have one final road trip. It's just 3 games in Pittsburgh next week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then one final home series against the New York Mets next weekend. And it is possible, it's still a little too early to say, but it is possible that when the Mets come to town next weekend, they might just stay in town because it might be the Mets that we're taking on in the first round of the playoffs. Again, we could still get that first round bye, but it could also be that, we get really familiar with the Mets 2 weeks from now.
I think also, didn't we play the Mets? Wasn't that was not our home opener, but our opening series was in New York against them, where Rhys Hoskins had a disagreement with them?
Yes, it was back on March 28th when this whole series started. So good work out of you paying attention. I did not watch Thursday Night Football. Apparently, Aaron Rodgers had a game, had a great game, and but I didn't watch, and I'm kind of off the Aaron Rodgers bandwagon. So if he did have a great game, I feel very happy for him.
Great.
Yeah, great.
I watched a 3-part documentary about hair metal on Paramount Plus last night. So
I saw you post about that. That last night did not go as you originally expected.
No, I had things I wanted to get done, and then Tracy Guns of the band LA Guns was like, "Hey, this thing is on Paramount Plus." I'm like, "I'll watch an episode." Then I'm like, "I'll watch all the episodes."
And it was a 3-part series. What?
It was 3 parts. Yeah, it wasn't super long, but it was fun, and it reminded me of my youth. And if you're over a certain age, you remember where you were when you heard Poison and Motley Crue for the first time. And oh, Pat, did you know that there were stunning and horrific downfalls with most of those bands too?
You don't say.
Oh my gosh, it's only like they didn't consume every drug ever made in the 80s.
It really should be listed as an official cause of death. Official cause of death being a rock and roll star.
Exactly.
It does happen. There's so much to cover on the other side of the break. We'll tell you what's in our daily newsletter that you can sign up for over at UpNorthNewsWI.com. We'll also cover some of the headlines that are floating out there, including that Eric Hovde's bank has some kind of a connection to a Mexican bank, and some folks are jumping all over it. I'm actually maybe going to give Eric Hovde a bit of a break on this one, to be fair. And I'm going to explain why coming up in just a bit. Wherever you're listening across Wisconsin on this beautiful Friday morning, when you're here, you're up north, live from Lake Wissota on the Civic Media Radio Network. Back in a bit. Today's history lesson includes a note about Huey Lewis and the News and one of their albums. That's coming up 30 minutes from now here on Up North News Radio on this Friday morning. In the Up North News daily newsletter, sign up for it over at UpNorthNewsWI.com. Let's talk about the stories first. Apparently, this is Brandy Old Fashioned Day in Wisconsin. That's every day. Every day is Brandy Old Fashioned Day in Wisconsin. But Christina Laurie has a story about the Brandy Old Fashioned and an interesting tidbit about the official recipe for the Brandy Old Fashioned. Spoiler alert, there isn't one. Also talks about string cheese. Did you know, Mr. Bach, that string cheese was invented by a Wisconsin farmer in 1976?
God bless that farmer.
I know, exactly. Good
Oh, my
stuff, right?
goodness.
Yeah.
When you get a Bloody Mary, aren't you always excited when you see string cheese of some sort?
Of course.
Oh, my
Yes.
God.
Yes. Welcome to Wisconsin, kids. A story about how more than 200 former staffers, Republican staffers for Bush and McCain and others are supporting Kamala Harris. And a link to our interview last week with Wisconsin Supreme Court candidate Susan Crawford. Also in there is a reminder, and this is the first time I'm mentioning it here, that at Up North News, we're doing our quarterly pledge drive. Yep, we're no different than PBS and plenty of other places that once a quarter or so badger you and say, we love what we do, we're going to keep doing it. But if you'd like to support us, we wouldn't mind that a bit. Go to the website, UpNorthNewsWI.com. Up in the top banner, normally I tell you to hit subscribe for the newsletter, but next to subscribe is another one that says support. And you can support Up North News by making a contribution through PayPal or a credit card, or you can mail a check to P.O. Box 27, Chippewa Falls, Wisconsin, 54729. Any little contribution is welcome. We get funded, because again, we're separate from civic media. We get funded in kind of the usual three different ways. There are a couple of big contributors, and we appreciate that. There are some mid-sized ones, and then there's a whole lot of grassroots donors that are out there. So anyway, if you would like to support Up North News, head over to UpNorthNewsWI.com and do that. I want to thank Kirk Bangstead and the folks at Minocqua Brewing Company for having me out to an event in Eau Claire last night. It was about helping encourage people not just to get registered to vote, but to get other people registered to vote and encourage other people to go out and vote. So you all should make sure to do the exact same thing. I was a little late getting there. Part of it was losing track of time and realizing that I not only was running late for the event, but still hadn't put the top up on the Jeep. And so, and of course, that's the day when you can't get the zipper to fit just right, or tab A doesn't go into slot B. But eventually we got that on, because otherwise I'd have been driving through a thunderstorm to get there. But again, thanks to Kirk and the folks there for a nice event yesterday. I regret to tell you that Glenn Grothman is doing Glenn Grothman things again. And so I think Greg's got some sound teed up here of Glenn Grothman on C-SPAN, I believe. And we're getting back into that subject of why are Republicans so obsessed. It's a suppression obsession with suppressing the votes of others, especially non-citizens, who don't vote because they don't want to risk being deported, but they still think it's happening, so they're still talking about it all the time. And listen to, at the end of this, the host on C-SPAN asking him what this is all based on. Give a listen.
Why did all but 3 Democrats vote against a provision yesterday that you have to prove that you're a citizen before you vote? I mean, isn't that a bizarre vote to take? But that is sadly where the Democrat Party is right now. They can't wait a few years until some of these new immigrants become citizens, or until they have children, they become citizens. The Democrat Party is so radical right now that they want these people voting immediately. And if they don't want them to vote, fine. Just have them show they're citizens.
What's the evidence that it's happening? Where have you seen that?
Well, I haven't seen it, but we know it's happening, right?
I haven't seen it, Greg, but I know it's happening.
I'm going to try, if I can find it. There is a clip of Mike Johnson.
I was just about to say, Mike Johnson has said the same thing. You could find a few more as well, but Mike Johnson was the first one that came to my mind too, where they're like, well, we know it's we've played it on the show. I remember now saying, oh, well, we just know it's there. You can't, that's not the kind of thing that you can measure. Actually, you can.
Yeah.
We read the numbers yesterday about this. You can measure it. But that's Glenn Grothman giving you a very honest explanation. Honest in the sense that they have no proof, but they feel in their bones that it must be happening. All right. Briefly here on Eric Hovde, California banker, Senate candidate. Dan Bice in the Journal-Sentinel yesterday. The headline is Democrats question Eric Hovde over his bank's $26 million deal with a troubled Mexican bank. And yeah, there is something rather unseemly when you read in the beginning that Banco Azteca back last December sent $26 million in cash to SunWest Bank on 4 airplane flights as part of a massive currency conversion known as repatriation. And the problem is that Banco Azteca has also had links to some unsavory characters working with, criminal groups that engage in extortion and in money laundering for drug sales and things like that. So you put those two things together, and it's not a good look for SunWest doing business with Banco Azteca. But I'm going to be fair here and tell you what the bank says is happening, because it is something that I experienced from my brief time living overseas, that U.S. dollars are still used all around the world, and Mexico being no different. Everybody around the world loves to get U.S. dollars. They will allow you to pay for things a lot of times instead of needing, a peso or a Caymanian dollar or whatever. But then those dollars eventually have to be, repatriated, turned into the cash of that particular country. And so what SunWest is saying, and what does happen around the world, is that cash is repatriated back. SunWest is saying that there are safeguards in place to make sure that this is not laundered money through Banco Azteca. I'm not here to tell you that that's right or wrong, just to say I've got just enough experience with repatriation and foreign money abroad that I want to know more. I'm not saying SunWest is clean by any stretch. Banco Azteca certainly isn't, but I'm not going to jump to conclusions. I want to learn more. Keya Vakil talks to us next. You're Up North. Wow. What a week. Wait, no, this is not a rerun. We're probably going to say that every week for at least 7 more weeks here till the election. It's 6:34 now on Up North News Radio. Keya Vakil joins us, Courier Newsroom's national political correspondent, and there is a lot of national stuff to look at as we head toward Election Day. Keya, hello. How are you?
Hello. I am tired and
overwhelmed and
ready to hibernate, honestly.
Yep. But we got a little bit more to do here because the metaphorical news gods keep raining on us, and what they rained yesterday was that an already troubled, I would argue, disturbed gubernatorial candidate in North Carolina that we've talked about previously in this segment was even more off the deep end than folks realized, and CNN was able to put some pieces together about Mark Robinson and his earlier life. And Keya, it ain't good.
No, it is not good. That is putting it mildly.
For folks that don't recall, this is the guy that was like saying some people need killing. He's talked about, how it's women who need to watch themselves, that it's their fault if they get pregnant. We were quite familiar with some of his other stuff. And it managed to get worse.
Yeah. So pre-Thursday, what we knew about him was that he wanted to ban abortion. He was a Holocaust denier. He blamed women. He called them murderers if they had abortions. He said they should control their, not have sex until they want to procreate. He wanted to ban birth control, or he didn't think it should be readily available.
Very conservative.
Very conservative. On Thursday, we found out that he, on various pornographic message boards about a little over a decade ago, called himself a, quote, black Nazi, called himself, lamented not being able to join the Ku Klux Klan, and said if he could, he would have called Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Lucifer, and then there's a racist term that I'm not going to repeat.
Of course.
He said slavery, quote, is not bad. Some people need to be slaves. I wish they would bring it back. I would certainly buy a few. That is a direct quote. And to be clear, this is offensive for about 100 different reasons. And that's just the beginning. He said he would prefer Hitler to any of the leadership during the Obama administration. He attacked Martin Luther King Jr. with a bunch of offensive, homophobic terms. He called them, quote, worse than a maggot. And it goes on and on. I should note, CNN only published a slice of what they could publish.
I was going to say just the family friendly stuff. And I use that in quotes because there's a lot worse in there.
Yeah. And of the stuff that's in there, he pretty much admitted in the posts to being a peeping Tom. He said liking transsexual porn for a guy who's very anti-trans now. It's always this. It's always the ones who are the most strident, the most militant, and then we find out what they were up to beforehand. But of course, Keya, in this day and age where we live now, in the words of the great political strategist Shaggy, I believe it was. Do you just say it wasn't me? It wasn't me. Yeah. Apparently, although CNN, the reporting is very thorough, and they have pretty much documented the paper trail.
They've got the receipts. Yeah,
they have all the receipts. If you come away from that with any doubt in your mind, then you're just never going to believe anything. But yeah, there's so many receipts. It's incredibly clear that this is Mark Robinson, and it's incredibly clear that he wrote these posts. And it's mind-boggling.
And it's not just that, people that are opposed to him politically or offended by him are seeing this. The Trump campaign is already putting distance between itself and him. They were already.
Yeah. They previously have said he cannot appear at any events with J.D. Vance or Donald Trump. And that's because his polling has been so bad, and because there've already been a litany of other stories in recent weeks about him, none of which remotely approach what came out on Thursday, but which were, for any other candidate would mean he would lose. So, the Trump campaign is in survival mode, but there are videos of Trump praising Mark Robinson, ironically comparing him to Martin Luther King.
Yes.
And so it's going to be hard to run away from that a little bit. Well, so Keya, where does this go from here? I mean, assuming that a deadline passes for him to pull himself out of the race so that his name's on the ballot anyway, but then he drops out. Does he get to name the successor?
No, the party would name us a new candidate, and it could be anyone except someone he beat in the primary. Robinson's name would remain on the ballot, I will note, and then just any vote that goes to him would instead go to that new candidate. So that's a mess, obviously.
Yes.
You know, that's probably an upgrade over Robinson still. Like, you could probably put anyone who didn't call themselves a Nazi on there and they would do better. You know, we're in Roy Moore territory now of like probably going to underperform the state by 20 points.
Well, okay. So now let's go to the next question then. Sure. Is North Carolina suddenly in play for Kamala Harris?
So I actually think it's always been in play since she entered the race. Joe Biden would have lost North Carolina and it would not have been close. But Kamala Harris has focused on North Carolina. She's been there several times this year, and I think we're probably at 10 visits this year, and at least 3 since she became the presidential candidate. And North Carolina is a state that is always competitive. It was the closest state that Biden lost in 2020 by just, I think, a hair over 1%. So she's very much in the race. And yes, having Mark Robinson on the Republican side as the top state, gubernatorial candidate for the party is not going to help Donald Trump. Whether it dramatically hurts him, it's hard to say, but it's not going to help. So yeah, it might cost him some votes. And, I would say it's going to be tight either way. I wouldn't be surprised if it's also 1% in either direction.
Sure.
But, it looks closer than Georgia does right now. It looks closer than Arizona does. So,
it makes you wonder about some of these states. I mean, Liz Cheney was in Texas to endorse the Democrat running against Ted Cruz. I guess would the bottom line be don't pay attention to any old maps. This is a whole new ball game, and I'm not saying every state's in play, but things are not the same.
No, I mean, I think it's a lot of the same map as 2020, but with little shifts. There was a poll that came out Thursday showing Colin Allred, the Senate candidate for Democrats in Texas, up a point on Ted Cruz. Wow. That's the first poll that I'm aware of all year that's shown him up. I would take that with a huge grain of salt, but that is a close race. We saw in 2018, the last time Ted Cruz ran, Beto O'Rourke ran under, kept it really close. No one has really come close to matching Beto's numbers in a statewide race since then, but Texas is trending purple to blue. It's just, will it actually ever flip? And we don't know. I don't think that it'll happen this year if you put a gun to my head and asked me, but I think it's happening over time. And, we're seeing some other states, obviously Ohio has trended away from Democrats. So the map is constantly shifting.
Yeah. I mean, and it's complicated. And that complication can really be seen in a microcosm in the Teamsters Union, where you have on one side a candidate and an incumbent president who have been as pro-union worker as they come and has received the endorsements of every major union except the National Teamsters Union. And yet all of these local Teamsters and regional Teamsters offices are kind of looking at their national office and their national president, Sean O'Brien, like, what the heck, man?
Yeah, what's happening in the Teamsters is fascinating because we're seeing, from Michigan to Wisconsin to Nevada to New York, all these locals endorse Harris even after, the national refused to. We know that it's just fascinating because, the Biden-Harris administration voted to save the pensions of, I don't even know how many Teamsters, but it was $36 billion, I believe, was the funding amount. And to see them not endorse, we want to believe that politics is about, materialism and about actual policy and things that affect people's lives. But this is sort of evidence that it's less about that today. It's more about culture war. It's more about, which is kind of bleak because, then does policy, it raises all sorts of questions about, you could deliver policy wise for folks and pass all sorts of things to help people, and they might still not vote for you because what, you support trans people's rights to exist?
And to what end? Because again, if you're talking about a union, and we can be talking about all kinds of other groups, but if
Yeah.
somebody's doing what's good for your membership,
Yep.
well, of course, not everybody in your group, your union, your company, whatever, not everybody's going to go along. And yeah, there are
Sure.
plenty of people who are union workers who do vote Republican. We've always known that. But to
course.
essentially turn your back on your identity as a group, a union, and somebody that is for you and somebody that would cut you off at the knees like Trump would, the whole thing has just been very puzzling this week.
Yeah, and Trump has just a long record of both rhetorically attacking unions and when he was president, was famously anti-labor and anti-worker. He and JD Vance talk a big game about championing the forgotten worker and being these populist factory floor types, which is bogus. Both went to Ivy League schools. Both of them. Neither of them could do a day of manual labor if their life depended on it.
And have been consistently pro-scab.
Yeah. And they are elites cosplaying as like company men who, or like shop floor guys. And it's just a joke.
Mm-hmm.
And, if they were elites and actually passed, doing that, but actually doing something to help people, that's a different story, but this is something on the right that we see over and over again, whether it's Josh Hawley or JD Vance or Marco Rubio or Donald Trump. They say they want to be more, pro-worker policy, but nothing has ever gotten passed because of them that is pro-worker.
Right. All right, let's end with some good news here. And that would be another big day on Wall Street, something that really does not get talked about during the Biden administration for, again, our theme is mysteries this week, but the Fed, cut rates by a half point, which was a big deal, a sign that the soft landing has arrived. Again, that doesn't mean perfection, but I guess the way that I would put it is, hey, Bidenomics, you're welcome. And there's nothing in here that should be seen as anything other than this economy still is the strongest one in the developed world.
Yeah. I mean, we've had slightly elevated interest rates for the past couple of years to try to help tame inflation. Inflation is now down to 2.5% year over year, the lowest in 3.5 years. Obviously, yes, in some sectors, costs are high, particularly in housing. Lowering interest rates will help lower mortgage borrowing rates, which will help bring down, ought to help lower housing costs. It'll help lower the cost of borrowing to build apartment buildings and build multifamily units, which will lead to more apartments being built and lower rents in the long run. It'll lead to lower car loans. And, the economy, again, there are issues, but yeah, if you look at any other major developed country in the world, they have had much higher inflation, in some cases double-digit inflation, and it is it has not gone perfectly, but overall, recovering from a once-in-a-century pandemic, where we are today is honestly, it's remarkable. Yeah, is it annoying to go and pay more for a coffee than you did 3 years ago? Of course it is, but in the grand scheme of things, we are in a much better place than we were in 2020.
So the news is there. But Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and Joe Biden, by extension, they have to overcome, of course, the vibe. And by the vibe, I mean people trash talking the American economy.
Yeah, I mean, Trump's entire message is everything is bad. I'm going to take you back to the promised land. What's unspoken there is the promised land. It's a promised land for white upper middle class people and nobody else. And, things are complicated. They're always complicated, but they're not universally bad. And a lot of the reasons that certain things are worse is because of Trump. One of the things that Kamala Harris rightly points out a lot of the time is that people are sick of this. People are sick of constantly having to think about politics, worry about politics. I'm sick of it and I work in it.
Keya Vakil, Courier Newsroom national correspondent. As always, appreciate the weekly updates. Have a great weekend.
You too.
We'll have today's history lesson next here up north.
sugar. Oh, honey, honey, you are my candy girl, and you got me wanting you.
There was once a more innocent time in America where our Saturday morning cartoons weren't anime and turtles doing karate. It was just those cute little high schoolers from Riverdale, like the Archies, having a band, singing Sugar Sugar, the number one song this day in 1969. Mr. Bach.
You realize what they did with the whole Archie gang, right?
In Riverdale?
The TV show?
Yeah, that's where I was going next. Riverdale,
Okay.
Riverdale was a kind and gentle and sweet and innocent place in the Saturday morning cartoons. And then they turned it into primetime porn, ladies and gentlemen. But, some of us are going to continue to live in the 1960s and listen to bubblegum music like that.
Primetime porn, you say? I wonder what Mark Robinson thinks about it.
Hey!
All back.
Let's see. The Animals recorded one of their tunes this day in 1965.
Stick around, but baby, remember, it's my life, and I'll do what I want.
A lot of that rebellious music back there in the mid 60s. I'll do what I want. Hey, you, get off my cloud. And the Archies going sugar. A sad day from 1973. Singer Jim Croce passed away. He and 5 others died when their aircraft crashed on takeoff from Louisiana.
Operator, or could you help me place this call?
There is no telling how many more hits and albums we would have received from Jim Croce had he lived. On that same day in 1973, Billie Jean King beat Bobby Riggs in the Battle of the Sexes tennis match at the Houston Astrodome. Now, I was 9 years old.
Yeah.
And I understood what a huge deal this was.
Yeah.
That Bobby Riggs was running his mouth, that women would never be equal, should never be equal, could never be good at sports. And she mopped the floor with him. And it looked good.
I can't remember if it was a documentary about this per se, or if it was just part of a documentary, but Billie Jean King is one of the classiest humans on earth. She was really good friends with him before and after the fact, and made it very clear. She's like, he was a showman, and I'm not saying what he said was right, but she's like, he was trying to stay relevant and popular. He just wanted to be loved, and I'm like, oh, that poor man.
And he was, by the way, he was a very accomplished tennis player.
Yeah.
But again, when you run your mouth too much, even with friends, we know this, even with friends. You're gonna they're gonna put you in your place sometimes. 2 years later, this is not Saturday Night Live we're talking about. ABC had a show called Saturday Night, hosted by sportsman Howard Cosell. The Bay City Rollers were on the debut.
You hear that little Scottish brogue?
Yep. Needless to say, Howard Cosell's show did not last as long as SNL, which is now moving into its 50th season. George R.R. Martin, Game of Thrones author. Well, can we say former Game of Thrones author? Because there's no more books coming out. He turned 76 today. One of the most versatile actors ever is 68 today. Gary Cole turned 68.
Yes.
I mean, what do you like him best from? Things like, The West Wing and The Good Wife and NCIS, or Talladega Nights and Dodgeball and Veep or Office Space. I mean, the guy really can do it all. So happy birthday to him.
I love him on The West Wing as Bingo Bob of Western Colorado, and ever since that, I realized that I that's all I can call Lauren Boebert is Bingo Boebert from Western Colorado.
And I think that role is actually underappreciated. And I mean, people know it. They know how, but he was so good as the vice president in The West Wing during those early seasons. On this day in 1986, Huey Lewis and the News released the album 4. That would be FORE, a little golf reference. You see, their previous album was called Sports.
Yep,
And
they get it, Pat. They get it. They get it.
Yep.
That's fine.
And it was also their fourth album.
Love it.
FORE. Yeah. Let's see. Plenty of hits on this one. Doing It All for My Baby, Hip to Be Square, Jacob's Ladder, all were a part of it. Happy birthday to identical twins, Matthew and Gunnar Nelson. They are 57 years old today, born to teen idol Ricky Nelson and actress Kristen Harmon. The Nelson twins would go on to form a musical group that they called Nelson.
These guys were mentioned in the documentary last night in the third episode. We're like, all right, we've got our like C and D list groups now.
On this day in 2014, holy cow, Pat. Meghan Trainor's All About That Bass hit number 1 for the first of 8 weeks.
Because you know I'm all about that bass, no trouble. I'm all about that bass, no trouble. I'm all about that bass, no trouble.
I think she's, Pat, all about the bass.
I think she is, yeah.
Yeah.
Today is National Tradesman Day, so everybody who's in a trade, good for you, good on you. Concussion Awareness Day is today. It's National Fried Rice Day. It's National POWMIA Recognition Day. National Punch Day, the beverage, not the physical action. It is Queso Day. But again, in a battle of cheeses, which would you rather have, queso or string cheese? Because it's also National String Cheese Day. Or dip your string cheese in some queso. Best of both worlds. Yeah, I see. You're intrigued, aren't you? More coming up next. You're Up North.
Boys like a little more booty to hold at night.
She's back.
Good morning.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Well, good. Good to
Happy
see
Friday.
you. Do you have either a fun or a restful weekend planned?
Restful.
Restful's good.
Yeah.
All right.
Need
Okay.
that one. How about
Yes.
you?
Working. Sherry's out of town, so we're just going to work because
Oh, okay.
there's 9,000 election stories that need to be written up. So,
Seriously.
yeah. So we'll just try to catch up on the backlog. So, all righty. Here we go. Well, 25 seconds.
All across Wisconsin from Civic Media, this is Up North News Radio. Now, live from our Lake Minnesota studio, here's the founding editor of Up North News, Pat Brightlow.
With Wisconsin news talk so fresh, it squeaks. Welcome back to the second hour of Up North News Radio, brought to you by Courier Newsroom and carried by our friends on the Civic Media Radio Network. It is 7:06. Nice to have you here on this Friday morning, September 20th, 2024. Coming up this hour, we'll have former U.S. Attorney Jim Santel here. You'll recall I had some rather strong words for the Dodge County Sheriff and his interpretation of ballot drop boxes and how, in my view, he strong-armed and intimidated every local clerk in Dodge County from providing that service to voters. Was I out of line? I've got a U.S. attorney who will tell me if I need to lawyer up or not. Mark Jacob will be along to talk about press coverage of this week's campaign stories. Dan Schumacher will be here to talk about sports. He probably thinks the Bears are still, just about to win the Super Bowl. Maybe they just give it to them next week, because they're so happy with their new quarterback. Brittany Merlot has our forecast coming up in just a bit here. But first, we've got to tell you about the Go for the Green or Gold Text to Win contest. It's something we do 4 times a day. We give you a keyword that you text to us through the Civic Media app. Each of those times, 4 times a day, we pick one entry statewide at random, and the winner gets $100 cash or gold jewelry, depending on what's up for grabs that hour. And then of all the entries, there will be one grand prize winner drawn, getting a pair of indoor tickets to see the Green and Gold in Green Bay on Monday, December 23rd against New Orleans. Catch that contest at 7 a.m., 11 a.m., 1 p.m., and 4 p.m., all throughout today and all of next week. You have to text the keyword in the app before the end of each hour. And remember, other Civic Media shows and stations are also taking part in this statewide contest. So here's the word for $100. Text green. Green is the word. And now I just saw somebody text a different word, Greg. So I'm going to go double check that while you remind people about the importance of getting the Civic Media app.
Oh, the Civic Media app is so important to have when you want to enter in contests like this. You must take part through the app, and you can also call or text through that app uploaded. And that sounds like what now, Pat?
The word
and we're getting breaking news from Pat.
The word is bill. The word bill was in green ink here, which is our cue that it's for $100. The word is bill, B-I-L-L.
Gotcha.
Text the word bill, and you'll get $100, or you'll be in the running for getting $100 in the Go for the Green or Gold Text to Win contest. I am so up to speed on every little detail, every little nuance of this.
Pat, I got this for you. You're doing great, buddy.
Thanks. All right, there we go. Brittany Merlot is here with the forecast, and it was a dark and stormy night here in the Chippewa Valley yesterday. Rather loud, 3/4 inch of rain over here, but now are you hearing all those pings?
Yes, I was just about to say, can someone please turn off their notifications right now?
I was going to say,
coming through right now and being recorded.
They're now coming through my headphones instead of my computer speaker.
There
Brittany,
we go.
I'm going to go finish this cup of coffee. You tell us about the
Yes.
forecast, and I'm going to come
take
out
a
a better
break.
man on the other side. Yeah.
Sounds good. All right, I got this. Got the stage. Here we go, guys. So yes, that rain rolled through overnight. A lot of us picking up generally about a half an inch. Obviously, some places got closer to 1 inch of rainfall. We needed it. Of course, about 16% of the state is in a moderate drought right now. So every drop counts. Highs today still feeling like summer because it is still summer. Highs will reach 80 to 85 degrees statewide. We'll have a breezy west wind today and partly sunny skies. Yes, it will get sunny. I know a good chunk of the central part of the state is very cloudy and misty, even some patchy fog out there right now, but the sun will appear. It will be a good day today and still warm. Same thing for tomorrow, too. We hold on to that sunshine for Saturday. Highs hitting near 90 into southern parts of the state, while further north, more like those low to mid 80s. So, of course, it will be another summery day for the last day of summer because the first day of fall is on Sunday. It's the autumnal equinox early in the morning, and temperatures and the weather is going to follow it perfectly because our highs on Sunday are only going to be in the upper 60s to low 70s. That's it. So that fall weather really here, that holds on for Monday too. Highs in the upper 60s statewide. Statewide, everybody. So get ready for that. Plus, it's got showers and storms with it. So we are going to see that moving in by late tomorrow night and throughout our Sunday.
So to everything, there is a season, and this season is about to turn.
On the perfect day too. I
Yeah.
love it.
Right on time. All right, Brittany, Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Greg, as a reminder about the contest, as we're looking at some of the entries coming in, Mr. Bach.
Yes, the word is, and this I never like to point anyone out, but we did get a misspelling, or not the right word. It's the word bill, B-I-L-L, like dollar bill.
Yes, bill, dollar.
Or your best buddy
Bills.
bill.
Oh, yeah, I like that. Let's see. And I let Brittany go before I gave her a good morning from Rob in Tigerton, where it's cloudy and 62. They got also about 0.7 of an inch of rain. He says he now has, after his doctor visit this week, a heart monitor to check his heart that he has to wear till noon tomorrow, and that he mowed 5 yards yesterday. He said he remembers watching the Archie cartoons back in the day, loved that song Sugar Sugar, and Jughead was his favorite character. And from a summer weather standpoint, he says Wausau set a record for the most consecutive days with highs 80 or above, with 9 days in a row, 80 or above. The previous record was 8 consecutive days, set back in 1933 and 1978. You looked like you looked like you were about to say something over here.
Not at all. I'm just taking all the information, and he's becoming like our farmer's almanac, like just all this information. It's amazing. I love it.
Yep. And I like that we caught Tony off guard. You write in on YouTube. Wait, what was that? News so fresh it squeaks. That was actually one of our very first slogans on the Up North News daily newsletter, and it really went over well. And we should have used it more often. So now I'm gonna.
And now Civic Media will take it.
Something like that, yes. Former U.S. Attorney Jim Santel joins us in just a few minutes here. First, a couple of other stories to talk about. Let's do a national one first. On Thursday, the House Oversight Committee held a hearing designed to focus on what they called, quote, the consequences of the Biden-Harris administration's policy failures. That's what the House Oversight Committee did yesterday. They invited some various Republican witnesses to testify. It did not go well. Congressman Jasmine Crockett from Texas, you're about to hear from her, as she talked to two of the witnesses were authors of the Project 2025 right-wing fantasy plan to tear down American democracy. Listen to Congresswoman Crockett laying out one of the authors for claiming that rural broadband grants weren't successful because of DEI. Listen as Crockett points out that it was actually a case of these companies carelessly underestimating their costs in the rush to get taxpayer dollars, not anything related to having a diverse workforce. And her conclusion to this soundbite is magic.
Here's the deal. You've testified a lot about the problem with the broadband rollout being diversity, equity, and inclusion. You said DEI, I don't know how many times, which is one of the issues that Project 2025 takes issue with. But it's interesting to me because I have another article from the Texas Tribune And it actually specifically states that internet providers say they are simultaneously hopeful and skeptical about whether the incoming federal dollars will be enough to connect the most underserved Texans. Historically, other federal rural broadband funding programs have seen limited success because many companies who committed to providing broadband went into default after radically underestimating their cost. It doesn't say anything about diversity. And the final thing that I will say
Do you know
is
why
that
those
this
costs have
election,
increased
I didn't ask you a
substantially?
question. The final thing that I will say is that this election is the best example of why y'all are so afraid of diversity, equity, and inclusion, because then you can't have a simple-minded, underqualified white man somehow end up ascending. Instead, you've got to pay attention to the qualified Black woman that is on the other side. And with that, I will yield.
Don't yield. Keep talking. I would listen to her talk all day about that.
Never stop talking, Representative Crockett, please. You are just... I did not ask you a question. Like, no, you did not.
No, but of course, you know, the doofus white guy is going to try to interrupt her and talk over her. Yeah. I don't know where he learned that from, you know, and that she was having none of it, and it was a beautiful thing. All right, follow up to yesterday's discussion, and it's going to lead us into our next segment with U.S. Attorney Jim Santel, and it's about sheriffs gone wild. And in several different ways, unfortunately. And in this case yesterday, we talked about the Dodge County Sheriff Dale Schmidt being part of a state capitol press conference and basically confessing to intimidating every local elections clerk in his county not to offer ballot drop boxes despite the Wisconsin Supreme Court declaring them to be legal. And he offered up his own extremely narrow interpretation that if you don't have a video camera on a drop box 24 hours a day, then you can't see what's going in it. Never mind that, you know, we don't have cameras on mailboxes, but we still prosecute people for mail fraud. So we'll talk more about the sheriff part, but I wanted to play one of the bites I didn't get to yesterday. We did hear from Tom Tiffany trying to, again, intimidate non-citizens to keep them from voting, and talked about it being a deportable offense. But there was also Fond du Lac County District Attorney Eric Toney, who has in the past also legally harassed people. For example, mistakenly registering to vote where they pick up their mail rather than where they reside. And at that press conference this week, Eric Toney talked about another significant aspect of how Trumpers plan to cause chaos on Election Day with, quote, observers. Thousands of observers at polling places around the country. They might just stand there and observe. Some of them might also challenge innocent voters as an intimidation tactic. Actually, here's how he put it.
If somebody's thinking about cheating, there are a legion of poll workers. I know the Republican Party has recruited over 5,000 poll workers. I think over 600 will be in Milwaukee County alone, observing those elections. And one of the things I learned from my dad during his law enforcement career, and I'm sure our sheriffs would agree with this phrase, presence breeds compliance. And the analogy I like to give is that when you see a police car, you slow down on the highway because you don't want to get a speeding ticket. That same concept applies to our elections. With those poll watchers, that presence will breed compliance.
Presence will breed compliance. He was so proud of that phrase, he used it twice. Presence will breed compliance about election observers. Now, again, he's not talking about the presence of poll watchers in little Winnebago Heights, in his county. He's talking about those big, bad cities where non-citizen voting can at best be measured in the 10,000th of a percent. But if it leads a few dark-skinned voters to decide not to vote, or some white guy with overdue child support issues, well, mission accomplished. Jim Santel is next. You're Up North. This is the part of the program, Jim, where you get to not have to appear if I expose you to any legal problems here. So,
Exactly, right. The best I can do this morning in terms of something lighthearted is Billie Jean King from when you were 9 years old, getting this congressional medal just this past week. She's didn't get it yet, but
no, but it was voted, and I was going to get, I don't know if you have it in front of you, the number of Republicans who voted no on it.
Yes, right. Amazing.
Sure. Oh, let's see here. 87 Republicans, and I wanted to try to find the roll call to see if it was anybody that is from Wisconsin.
And on the sheriff issue, I think I may have also sent you this sheriff in I shouldn't be even laughing about it. It's terrible. In Eastern Kentucky, walks into a state court judge chambers and shoots him yesterday.
Send lawyers, guns, and money. Dad, get me out of this.
Former U.S. Attorney Jim Santel joins us now. And Jim reminds me that when I was mentioning Billie Jean King and the Battle of the Sexes 51 years ago, that Congress actually voted this week to award Billie Jean King the Congressional Gold Medal. It was not a unanimous vote, believe it or not. 87 Republicans voted no, including Glenn Grothman, who we played in the last hour, saying he can't prove there's any non-citizen voting, but he just knows that it happens. And Scott Fitzgerald voting no. Brian Stile, Mark Pocan, Gwen Moore all voted yes. Tom Tiffany and Derek Van Orden did not vote. Jim Santel with us now. Jim, good morning. How are you?
Always good to be with you again on this Good Friday morning.
Yes, and Jim, as always, is prepping for his weekend show, Amicus, a Law Review, heard live Saturday mornings, 9 to 11 on some of these fine civic media radio stations. Jim, I have given you every opportunity to bail out of this segment and to not risk any legal exposure based on my... and I'm telling you, man, I have toned it down compared to how red hot I was when I first heard about, what the Dodge County Sheriff was doing, and basically there's no absentee ballot drop boxes in Dodge County right now because the local sheriff, expressed himself to these local clerks. I am quietly outraged, and I wanted to get your take on sheriffs playing the role of interpreting Wisconsin Elections Commission voting guidance to local clerks. Is that something we normally hear about?
And I think you've identified, Pat, exactly what the issue here is. And that is the roles and responsibilities of law enforcement officers. And again, I do not want to indicate that Sheriff Schmidt himself is a card-carrying member, but I'm sure many of your listeners know that there is this notion out there called constitutional sheriffs. And this story that you've been reporting on, and I think responding to appropriately, with a level of perhaps, as you've said, moderated outrage, but it's a reason for, at a minimum, great concern and maybe legitimate complete outrage. This notion that somehow the sheriffs are these super law enforcement people who have got to be monitoring and directing us in all areas. The constitutional sheriff's concept basically says that sheriffs and not state officials who decide these things, not federal governments who monitor and develop law out there, they're the ones who are responsible for all lands, all properties within our nation. And also, they're the ultimate law enforcement authorities. It goes back to what some of your listeners may have talked about or know about as the posse comitatus. And again, I'm not indicating that Schmidt himself is a part of this group, but there are groups out there, many of them, including a group called the Constitutional Sheriffs and Peace Officers Association that animates a lot of these sheriffs around the country, basically to say, you get out there and you be political and you comment on and you provide information, so-called information, about things that are properly in another lane, legislative issues, clerks' issues in this case. And again, that raises the other important point which you've articulated. Supreme Court said clerks in their discretion can do this if they choose to do so. It's a clerk decision. I know there's also some municipal councils and village boards who are weighing in appropriately legislatively, not for the sheriffs to do. And that's the other concern about this, just from a purely legal standpoint.
Yeah, and I will say again, and I'll leave it to others to connect the dots, but Wisconsin Statute 1209, paragraph 2 says no person may by duress impede or prevent the free exercise of the franchise at an election. And I just don't envision any local clerk, when a sheriff comes to call, saying to them, get out of my office, you're not an elections judge, I will interpret the law here as the election clerk. It is by default, intimidating to have a law enforcement officer come in and give their interpretation of the law. So while I am not personally asking Attorney General Josh Kaul to, think about this. I'm thinking it to myself. I can't help it if it falls out of my mouth that way. But let me get to the point that you can comment on, and that is anybody engaged in intimidation at a polling place or intimidation of an elections official. Never mind who it is. Nobody gets to do that. Nobody.
That's absolutely right. And, this also goes back to this fundamental notion when the Voting Rights Act was passed, the civil rights laws in the 1960s. The whole idea behind this is not to restrict voting, restrict proper and legal voting. It is to expand the franchise and ensure that a couple of things happen. Number one, that people who are properly entitled to vote get access to the polls. That's the entire idea behind the law. It goes back again to the mid-1960s. And second, very importantly, that none of the restrictions, the burdens on voting, including intimidation, coercion, are a part of the practices out there. That's why we long ago, not only constitutionally, but in other areas, restricted things like poll taxes and other things that are intended by their very nature to stop people from voting, to prompt them, as you just indicated, to turn around and say, gee, I don't want that problem, and go back home. That chilling effect, that's exactly what our federal laws and state laws also prohibited, in the interest of ensuring that people who are properly able to vote, and again, this notion too that non-citizens are out there voting wildly. It is absurd. It is just a crazy notion. People vote, again, here in Wisconsin and other places, when they've been established residents. Of course, they're who they are when it comes to identity. We've got processes in place that make this notion of widespread voting fraud just crazy. But this, once again, an attempt to not only undermine what the law has said, but to send messages across the state, at least, with respect to these three clerks and others, that, the broader access, broader capacity to vote, not a good thing. So let's put an end to that. And that's the other broader issues related to what he is plainly attempting to do.
Sure. And let's set something up for a future visit, because I know we don't have time for it today. But the quote that J.D. Vance made about how all of the migrants in Ohio, and it's been made clear they are there legally. And his quote was along the lines of, well, Kamala Harris waved a magic wand, and that's not good enough for me, so I'm still going to call them illegal aliens, and he's still going to try to have them deported. I know we're going to be talking about immigration issues plenty, because that's what, Trump and Vance keep bringing up. So we should maybe get into that notion of legal immigration versus undocumented migrants, and help people understand that when somebody plays by the rules and is here legally, they should not face, what they're calling denaturalization, which is part of Project 2025. So put that on your spindle for next week, okay?
We've got that on the schedule. We'll do just that. Lots of things to unpack there. And always good to be with you on this Good Friday morning, Pat.
Again, we only get a few minutes, Chip. You get 2 hours with him on Saturday mornings. Tune in for that on Civic Media, replays on Sunday. Thank you, Jim. Have a great weekend.
You too. We'll see you next week. Take care.
All right. Mark Jacob is coming up right after this. You're Up North.
I took a little risk.
There we go. All right. Boy, we throw so much at you here. And it wasn't that I got a note on the text line too. It's not that I didn't want to do the Kentucky thing. I just knew with time. And
right.
Plus I think we still have things to learn about, somebody was engaged in some kind of hanky-panky there, and it's not yet clear who. Right. So I think I'm sure we will have time to get into that as that case develops too.
Right. Absolutely. Not to belabor it, but this constitutional sheriff's thing, it's a big deal. It's out there, and we've seen it here in Wisconsin. It's a really dangerous concept out there. And you got elected sheriffs saying, you know what, I am God. Mm-hmm. And it goes back to the Shire Reef in, the first centuries of England, and scary stuff.
Well, and I also think of that small newspaper, now I forget if it was Texas or some other state, where, again, they didn't like the reporting, and so they basically raided the newspaper, right. And the owner had a heart attack from it. Just some of this extra legal stuff is just downright scary, and it's being encouraged by people.
Yeah, and it happens. It happens. They know, even if in the end they're not effective in the ultimate result, they know that it has its effect in the moment, right? And that's the intent.
And that's exactly the intent. All right. Thank you, sir.
Thanks so much. We'll
talk to you later. Yep.
Bye-bye.
Oh, Mark.
What a week.
Olivia Newsy. Is that how we say her last name?
Newsy.
Yeah. What the hell?
You know, it's.
Is that a fair first question? Mark, Olivia Newsy, what the hell?
Oh, man. It's like the state of journalism. It's just makes you, and then you have Maggie Haberman talking about the left-wing industry that's criticizing journalism.
Yep.
Which I guess I'm a member of.
I guess you are. Yeah. All right. I'm going to go fill my coffee cup. I'll pull you out of the waiting room in a bit here.
Cool.
All right. Again, it was the Huey Lewis and the News album 4 that came out on this day in, I had that year right in front of me here, 1986. One of several hits that came off that album. 7:35 now on this Friday morning on Up North News Radio. And to get into our conversation, as we do every week with Mark Jacobs of the Stop the Presses newsletter, I think we're just going to go with his most recent tweet, a comment by Euripides. Every man is like the company he is wont to keep. And on this, you carbon copy Donald Trump, Mark Robinson, Matt Gaetz, RFK Jr., Lowen Boebert, Ted Cruz, Ron Johnson, J.D. Vance, Herschel Walker, Laura Loomer, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Jim Jordan, Kevin McCarthy, Josh Hawley, Elise Stefanik. How many more posts do you have to tack onto that? Or are we going to stop right there?
I'm going to stop there, Pat.
Okay.
I mean, I could spend all day on that, but it is really the truth that you look at who endorses whom, and the RFK Jr. stuff, it was wacky before, but now just keeps on getting worse. And it's just so on brand. Unfortunately, that kind of stuff is just so on brand for the Republican Party these days.
For, as Tony writes from up nationally on YouTube, the best people. Trump always saying he's going to surround himself with the best people.
Yeah,
well,
and then he fires them. You know,
and
it's you look at his cabinet when he was president. It's hire him, fire him, and then call him terrible and say it's one of those who the heck picked those people. You know,
right.
It's just amazing more people don't figure out that Trump doesn't know how to do anything other than demagogue.
All right. Well, there's always plenty to talk about in terms of how the news has been covered this week by media, and we'll certainly find some other stories. But it's the most recent story or scandal or whatever you want to call it for the National Press Corps that we want to talk about first, and that would be reporter Olivia Nuzzi of, is it New Yorker magazine?
No, the New York magazine.
New York magazine. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And she's one of those who, I mean, back you note that she had been kind of a promoter of Robert Kennedy Jr. in some of her writing. You bring up a quote from back in March where she's saying, we're forgetting or purposefully ignoring something rather important. This is not a 2-man race. It's a 3-man race, as she continues to, puff up Robert Kennedy Jr. And now comes word yesterday that they may have been having some kind of relationship. We don't know the full nature of
romantic relationship.
We'll call it romantic relationship. And I mean, you found a tweet from her in 2015 from New York Magazine with the headline, "Why can't Hollywood get female journalists right?" And she writes, "Why does Hollywood think female reporters sleep with their sources?" Oops.
Yeah, this is just terrible. And it's one of those things where Olivia Nuzzi was, she's pretty young. She's 31, which is, like 4 decades younger than RFK Jr. And she's this celebrity journalist. And I'm always suspicious of people who want to be celebrity journalists. And I don't mean journalists who cover celebrities. I mean journalists who want to be celebrities. Right. And she was one of those. And so she, very flashy, long blonde hair, got really good interviews with, nothing wrong with long blonde hair, Pat. I mean, I'm trying not to be sexist about this because there are plenty of men who are so completely unethical in the journalism business. I'm just saying that she ended up getting great interviews with people who are proven, sexist harassers like Donald Trump and Rudy Giuliani. And RFK Jr. And so she ends up getting those big interviews, writing very flashy, stories about them. And then here it is revealed that New York Magazine, who is her primary employer, has put her on leave because they found out she was having a romantic relationship with RFK Jr., who she's been covering since, last year. And, that's the kind of thing is, in this business, I understand people can have to be people, and if you fall in love with someone or whatever, that that happens in life. We're all human beings. But when that happens, you immediately go to if you're a journalist, you immediately go to your employer and say, "Hey, I can't cover this story anymore."
That's the point. That's the point, is that this isn't about human behavior. We're not judging human behavior. This is from a professional standpoint. And all I can think of, and I didn't have time to, I wish I had time to rack up the audio, was one of those reality shows where Tyra Banks is yelling at one of the women, "I was rooting for you. We were all rooting for you. How dare you?" And you can just hear women journalists everywhere saying, why? Because, again, it's a professional misstep of such an immense magnitude, and it really it's going to hurt a lot of other reporters.
Right, it hurts the credibility of the whole industry, really, when stuff like this happens. And it's not. It should be remembered she was one of the main people who was just pounding on Joe Biden, saying that he had lost his mind and didn't know what he was doing and needed to get out of the race and all this, just pounding on him. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, according to sources in New York Magazine, which put her on leave, she's having an affair with one of Biden's opponents. I mean, nothing could be more unethical than that. It's crazy. When this kind of stuff happens, it's really alarming. And I being a kind of a wizened veteran, former journalist, former Metro editor at the Tribune, I was invited to be on this panel on this seminar online just a couple of days ago, and we were talking about how to cover politics. And I listed like 8 ways things you should and should not do. And the last one was, don't be friends with politicians.
Mm-hmm.
Do not be friends with them. I said, you're covering them. You're in the same place with them. You're traveling with them. They may be charming because politicians tend to be, some of them, but don't become friends with them. Do not ever. If you become friends with them, stop covering them, because that's to me is a real simple rule.
It is. I mean, it truly is. Doesn't mean it's always easy, but it's still, I mean, that's as best practices as it gets. So related to that is Maggie Haberman, New York Times reporter who has such access to Trump, and now in an interview with National Public Radio says that there is an industry, in quotation marks I'm putting it, an industry dedicated to attacking the media from the left for its coverage of Trump, and that in her view it is undermining faith in journalism. And as Dan Frumkin from Press Watchers puts up, and you retweeted, there is no such industry. There's just a bunch of us who want better journalism.
Yeah, right. I mean, if there was actually an industry of leftist critics who don't like the New York Times, those people would be monetizing it in some way. They're not. I mean, that's just her not wanting to be criticized. And Pat, again, I think both of us know that this is a nuanced thing, and it's really difficult to cover a campaign, and because you want to get sources and you want to get people to talk to you. And clearly Maggie Haberman is, she has a lot of great sources in Team Trump, but what is she doing to get those sources? Is she behaving properly? I don't know whether she is or not, but there are certain things that she does like this that make you wonder. And I've been critical of New York Times coverage of politics for years because they've just failed to meet the moment and to really expose Trump. They've normalized Trump in a bad way, especially their headlines. But there are certain things I've noticed with Maggie Haberman. For example, Bernie Kerik, the former New York police commissioner, who is a big Trumpy. She describes him in her stories as a former New York City police commissioner. She should describe him in her stories as former New York City police commissioner who did several years in prison for business fraud or for tax fraud, because that's the truth. And that kind of fact is a good context for understanding what he says and whether he's believable. But she doesn't put that in. And I only have to wonder whether she omits that because she wants him as a source, because she's trying to foster him as a source for her. And that's where when it's tough covering politics, you have to not make compromises in order to build sources.
And by the way, and again, I sound like I'm being too cute by half here, but if you're in a situation like that, the reporter and the source pretty much have to have this understanding, like, look, I'm going to mention that you were convicted or that you did prison time for fraud. If you've got a source that's like, well, if you even mention that, I'm not going to be your source anymore. I'm not going to be your friend anymore. Well, then you're fine. You're doing it wrong. In your latest series on media misses with Stephen Beschloss, you talk about how some members of the media, especially Politico, which is questionable always in and of itself, but Politico is so unhappy that Kamala Harris actually engages in something that we should actually want from our political leaders. They stay on message. But apparently when Kamala Harris stays on message and makes the points that she wants to make instead of meandering, they're bored. They're bored with Kamala Harris because
they wrote some snarky headline about how she was sticking to the script. And which really, I took that to mean, being in journalism and understanding what happens when reporters cover stuff and come back to their editor and tell them what they got. I viewed that as the reporters complaining that, oh, she didn't give us anything new. She didn't commit any gaffes. She didn't do anything that gives us a new headline. She actually just did her talking points. Well, in politics, you're supposed to do your talking points. That's what you're supposed to have talking points. You're supposed to do them. You're supposed to stay on message. You're supposed to talk about the issues. You're not supposed to talk about Hannibal Lecter and cancer-causing windmills and stuff like that. And Politico, being kind of viewing politics as an industry with tactics and stuff, they often criticize Trump for wandering around and not staying on message. But then when Kamala Harris does exactly that, stays on message, they complain that they're bored. And it's just so shallow. On Fox News, related to this, on Fox News, they had a chyron that said Kamala plagiarizes herself, which is completely absurd when you think about it. So she said the same thing that she said 2 or 3 days ago. Okay, that's what politicians do in the middle of a campaign,
right?
Because they're talking to different audiences and because they want to emphasize where they stand on issues. That's not plagiarism. Fox News is idiocy, but that's not plagiarism.
I hope this one isn't too nuanced, but this was one I singled out this week. It was an Associated Press story talking about a woman's death after delayed abortion treatment. And the line said, Democrats and abortion rights advocates seized on the report, saying it proves women's health is suffering from draconian abortion bans. A point that anti-abortion advocates have rebuffed and discounted as misinformation. I mean, that to me is a textbook case of both sidesism, Mark, in that, again, there are these abortion bans. This woman died. You can connect the dots.
Right.
But because the anti-abortion advocates are calling it misinformation, you're putting those two equally in a sentence. And I'm not saying that you don't say what anti-abortion advocates say, but I think that as an editor, I don't think you try to put those on the same plane.
No, and you don't put them in the same sentence.
Yeah.
And you also don't put the lie at the end of the sentence. That ends up giving them that was a big gift to them.
Right.
And if you're saying that they say it's misinformation, look into whether it actually is misinformation. That story was broken by ProPublica, which is doing great work. And I don't think the facts have been disputed. I mean, the woman died because she didn't get treatment, and she didn't get treatment because of these draconian abortion bans that we're seeing around the country. That's what you go read the story. It's in ProPublica and it's free. So, go read it. But I just feel like that kind of presentation of the news is just new journalists going into their safe space.
It's related to that New York Times headline the other day, how J.D. Vance's combative conservatism is shaping Trumpism 2.0. In other words, shouldn't the word lie be in there?
Right. Lying about stuff that never happened in Ohio.
Yeah, exactly. Mark Jacob, thank you so much as always. Appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
All right, you too.
Hang in there. We only got 46 days to go.
Yeah, it's going to be a long 46 days.
We can do anything for 46 days. All right. Thank you, sir. All right. Just another reminder that the Go for the Green or Gold contest, text to win contest, the keyword this hour is Bill, BILL. You've got to the end of this hour to text it using the Civic Media app, and then you will be in the running for $100 cash. And then we'll do this again at 11 a.m. on the Civic Media Radio Network. It's a statewide text-to-win contest. Dan Schumacher coming in next. We'll talk a little sports and wrap things up heading into the weekend. Next, you're Up North. Fun.
It is, huh?
How are we doing?
Good. Just watching some replays of some of the body language and some of the language that was going on between Aaron Rodgers and his coach last night.
Well, yeah. What was that about? Can you tell, or have they said?
I just keep watching it, and it seems like the coach wants to embrace him after threw a touchdown, and Rodgers kind of pushes him away and says, "Hey, I know what I'm doing," type of deal,
Okay.
God, Aaron is just a jackass.
What are you talking about? He's a man of the people.
Aaron.
He's basically a doctor.
Yeah, right. Go back to your hovel.
Oh, boy.
Beth, did you hear any storms last night? Because it was like,
off in the distance.
Yeah, so did I.
It all kind of just went south of us.
It did. It was a lightning show like crazy.
It was very impressive.
Yep.
So.
Well, you got your Brewers are in.
Yep, we do.
Game over there.
Yep. No. It's going too early again.
My favorite drums.
Yep. anyway, we made the commercial breaks a minute longer here. So.
I will tell you that I think it's the beginning of the end for the Dead.
Oh, really? Well, I mean,
right now?
Oh.
Well, I will tell you, John Mayer bought the whole thing out. So he has 51% of the naming and control of Dead and Company.
What?
Yeah, so Bill Kreutzmann quit because of that before this last tour at the Sphere. And now Bob Weir has announced that he's going to do what they call Dead Ahead, start something new with Sturgill Simpson and all kinds of different musicians.
Right. 10 seconds.
But Mickey Hart backed out, and so the only one left is Bob.
Here we go. I can hear you out there going, I'll bet Pat picked this one out because it's the only Grateful Dead song he knows. And you'd be right. You'd be right, because in today's history lesson, on this day in 1987, the Grateful Dead peaked on the Hot 100 chart with Touch of Grey. Any chance, Dan, you remember where they peaked at on the Hot 100 chart?
I don't think they got above 10, did they?
10. Very good. Number 10. It was a top 10 hit for them.
Yep.
Folks, this is your mom's favorite Grateful Dead song.
I love
the drums on it. I think it's one of my favorite Dead songs from a drumming standpoint. You can really hear Mickey pounding it. You can hear Billy hitting his beats. I just love the drums to it.
And the harmonies are wonderful. It's a great song.
Yes.
And you know what? They actually, this song hit top 10 in what you said, Pat, 87?
87, yep.
Okay. Did you know they started playing it in 84 and they must have had 5 to 7 different renditions?
Oh, yeah.
Jerry would constantly change things and change the beat and change the lyrics and add lyrics and take lyrics out before they got to this masterpiece that is now. It was the only top 10 hit they ever had.
I always do appreciate that. It's a little nerdy, but it has to be after the songs become a hit, not like we're not crowdsourcing the song.
Sure.
But at some point, go back and say, now here's how these things sounded. Like what was the Beatles one? The Love album was filled with takes like that, like Strawberry Fields Forever.
Yeah.
That on that album, it's a 4-part song. They divided it into fourths, starting with the very earliest draft into a cassette recorder, and then a second version, a third version, and then the final version for the last verse. I'd love to see more of that. But anyway, I'm getting away from sports here, where again the Brewers clinched the division. They lost to Arizona 5-1 last night. Game 2 of the series is tonight, 7:10, pregame at 6:35. The Badgers are off this week. They'll be at USC next Saturday. And then, of course, the Packers and the Titans Sunday at noon. Your Bears, with that phenomenal MVP, did they give him the MVP yet? Trophy for this year?
No,
okay. I guess he's really
talk.
good.
It's just
okay.
talk.
I see. And who are the Bears playing this week?
You know what? I don't know, but I just know that the Vikings, the Bears, and the Packers all play at noon on Sunday.
Okay.
So I have no idea.
The way God meant it.
I don't know what we're going to get for a game on Sunday.
The Bears are in Indianapolis to take on the Colts at
That's
noon.
supposed to be on CBS, but then
and the Vikings are hosting the Texans at noon, and the Packers play at noon in Tennessee.
So the Packers are listed as Fox, and the other two CBS. So I don't know if they're going to give us a doubleheader, and which ones do they pick? I mean, of course, I would imagine the Packers would be on Fox, no problem. But which Vikings and Bears? Probably.
Lucky you, I've got a Google machine here, and I actually do enjoy the coverage maps because they change, all the time, and break it up by markets and all of that. So on the map, Green Bay at Tennessee takes up basically the entire midsection of the country, stretching from Montana down to Tennessee and getting all of that. And then you've got, the other markets, getting Philadelphia, New Orleans, or Broncos, Buccaneers, or Giants, Browns. And then the late game, pretty much everybody is getting Baltimore versus Dallas. In other words, that's to say that for Chicago, probably the only place that's on would be in the Chicago market there. They're on the they're the CBS. Yep, they're the CBS game. The Bears are CBS this week. And again, just around the Chicago area, basically, Illinois, Indiana. And some of the
Welcome
periphery.
to another edition of Dan and Pat Figure Out TV.
Dan and Pat figure out the clicker, because we're going to fight over the clicker Sunday at noon at our local watering hole. So we got to know ahead of time where to find these things. That's us. That's what we do.
That's right.
How are things up in Ashland?
They've been good. We were, started the season. We had our first home soccer game Wednesday night, so that was fun. Well attended too by community and the students. So good things. Just starting to roll and turning the tide on enrollment and getting kids that we had Wisconsin Education Foundation thing where we had over 1,000 high schoolers come to the campus this week. So a lot of kids from the Northland got to come up to Ashland and see what Northland College is all about. So
nice.
It's been a productive week. I'm back in Chippewa today in a couple of days, and then I got to go back for like a 3-week stretch to Ashland. So, but loving it.
So there's bad news, but we're going to lead into it with good news, and that's that Aaron Rodgers had a good game. He's back from his injury. But the bad news being, didn't you feel for Tyler Van Dyke, the Badger quarterback, going down in the first series against Alabama? So again, Rodgers proves you can come back from injury, but that's not always the case. And boy, you just have to feel for that kid.
Yeah, you talk about that one, and then you talk about how about the Texas quarterback who was Urs, who was awesome, going to be first team All-American, but who's his backup? Archie Manning. Peyton Manning's nephew and the grandson of the great Archie Manning, the senior. But he lit it up and he became freshman SEC Player of the Week this past week. So, yeah, injuries are bad, but they create opportunities for others. And
I love with the Mannings, though. Somebody put up like is Archie Manning? Is he like the Abraham of the NFL? Just he's populated generations of the NFL after this with quarterbacks.
Yeah, he is, and all those three boys have got a nice TV career. Even Cooper's got his own little segment on ESPN on Monday nights. So,
well, that's the thing. They got sports talent and they got personal talent, and that's reason enough to either really love them or despise them, depending on.
Well, I tell you what. As we talked about off air before we got on, just to go back to Aaron Rodgers.
You got 15 seconds for it.
Yeah, he's his typical self. Watching last night's highlights and watching the replay on some of the interactions with his teammates to his head coach, he is all about him. He is all about him.
Oh yeah, always has been, always will be. Dan, thank you so much. I'll see you a little later.
See you guys. I'm out.
Greg is back for Matt and Air on Air. 2 short hours from now. Anything you want to tell us about?
Dan Schaefer at 10:30, talking Legos at 11.
That's all you need to know. All right, everybody, thanks for joining us for Up North News Radio this week. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you back here first thing Monday morning, 6 a.m. Up North.